Welcome to our Chamber Connect, supporting the wellbeing of furloughed employees returning to the workplace webinar. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide support to employers who are planning a return to work for their furloughed staff, but also what us as employees can do as well. This webinar is part of the work we are doing around leadership and wellbeing, and it comes as no surprise that the pandemic has been an ultimate test of leadership, as well as understanding the immediate and long-term effects it has and will have on our wellbeing. And we're delighted to be able to offer support, insight and advice via our Leadership and Wellbeing Hub. So please do take the time to have a look at our experts and the support on offer. I'll now pass you over to Naomi Watkins-Ligudzinska, founder of NW Counselling Hub, who will be introducing today's panel and beginning the discussion.
Thank you, Jolie. So I'll now introduce the panellists for today, who will all give a brief introduction of themselves. So we'll start with Alison. So Alison Harris is the founder of Alison Harris Wellbeing. Do you want to give us a brief introduction, Alison?
Hi, yes. I'm Alison Harris. I'm self-employed and I'm an NLP master practitioner as well as a nutritional therapist. I've been self-employed for about 4 years and I help people privately and in corporate settings through one-to-one coaching. In any aspect of their well-being, really. I also do, when we're not in a pandemic, I do workshops as well, and I'm a former teacher. So yeah, just people that get stuck with issues around well-being, you know, I help them to become unstuck.
Great, thank you, Alison. Next we have Rachel Linstead, who is the founder of Firecracker. Tell us a bit about yourself, Rachel.
Morning all, I hope you're well today. I'm Rachel from Firecracker, and like Alison, I'm also a qualified nutritionist, and my focus around business and Firecracker is sparking your energy and sparking the business energy in business, which is all around creating positive workplace culture and happy and healthy workforces, looking at how food and your lifestyle choices impact on your productivity and your time during the day at work. I'm also a qualified first aider for mental health, so help people to understand how mental health impacts on performance, but also how nutrition and food impacts on your mental health and the choices you can make to support your body in dealing with what life throws at us, whether that's in the workplace or global pandemics, but ultimately looking to create happy, healthy employees.
Great, thank you, Rachel. And we have Michelle Johnson, Head of Organisational Development at PCW Consulting. Tell us a bit about yourself, Michelle.
Morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Michelle. PCW Consulting support businesses through transformation change. So obviously this year I've been working quite closely with businesses through the pandemic and continue to support business to realign the business strategy. From a personal perspective, previously worked in HR, so I've got a passion for supporting wellbeing strategies in business. A lot of conversations we're having with businesses at the moment is how we support employees coming back into the workplace and obviously support hybrid working. So similar to some of the panellists, I'm also a mental health first aider and also an NLP practitioner, so something quite close to my heart as well. So thank you for the opportunity to join today.
Great, thank you, Michelle. And obviously I'm Naomi Watkins-Ligudzinska, CEO, researcher, motivational speaker, author, and running of NW Counselling Hub. So we provide therapy for children and adults, and we are a training academy as well. So brilliant panel of people and experts. Anyone who's tuning in live, you can use the chat function to ask questions and we'll keep an eye on those. But this is also being recorded, so people are able to watch this on demand. So we have got a couple of questions already that we can go to. So the first question is, do we think that businesses should contact each individual directly prior to them returning to the office to address any individual concerns? I think we'll go to Michelle first for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, there's no hard and fast rule at the moment. I mean, regardless, you really should be giving people sufficient notice. Obviously, if you put yourself in the employee's shoes, you've been out of work for several months. Obviously, some people potentially are going nearing that 18-month mark now. So quite a long period of time away. And just from a practical perspective, employees need that time to prepare, so mentally, but also some of the practical solutions, sorting out childcare. Obviously, home work-life balance has significantly changed for them over the last period while they've been furloughed. So yeah, from my perspective, I'm encouraging our clients, you know, where you can, at least a week, ideally if longer. So if you can prepare people for that, then hopefully I'll help that landing when they return to the workplace.
Great. Has anyone else got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think personally, organisations should have been in contact with those furloughed staff throughout the time they've been on furlough. It's, you know, it's a little bit similar to when someone's on long-term sick. You know, businesses often struggle to whether should I contact someone who's long-term sick, and my answer is yes. Keep them involved. Don't actually ask them to do work. Don't, you know, cross the boundaries, but make them feel part of the team. So they're still part of your organisation, be it on sick or actually at the moment furlough. That you should encourage them to still be part of, you know, the full landscape of what the culture is, and, you know, making them feel part of that is opportunity. So yes, they should contact them and give, like Michelle said, give them enough time to mentally prepare, but also logistically prepare as well.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
I just want to add that time is the most important thing, and you know, that time, that investment in that time will pay dividends long term. You know, it really cannot be undervalued. So so yeah, I would agree with the rest of the panelists, definitely.
And I think keeping it individual just makes the individual feel personal about the whole thing as well, doesn't it? You know, there's some people who might just send a generic email to people who've been furloughed or letter, but I think it's advisable that managers really take the time to pick up the phone and give employees that comfort that they're going to be there to support them on that return to work, really tailoring it for the individual.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a lot of a conversation now, isn't there, about having a hybrid approach. So lots of people talking about working from home and working from the office. What do we think to that? Do we think that's a good idea? Will that have any long-term impacts? What's our thoughts?
I mean, certainly.
Rachel?
Sorry.
Go on, Michelle,
yeah,
you start.
Oh, sorry.
That's a problem with Zoom, isn't it? We all talk over each other. Go on, Michelle.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for us, we're finding the clients have depended on what markets they work in. So obviously some clients are going to be client-led, so it depends obviously who their end users are. So we've got some clients who obviously are kind of working in collaboration with their supply chain and the clients to understand what they're doing. But with that, obviously listening to their employees. So managing expectations, we can't meet everybody's needs because obviously that's not realistic, but obviously let's understand what the employees want. And obviously it's a very different backdrop to what it was 18 months ago. But I think realistically, you know, employees just need to have clear communication around what the plan is. And we wrote a recent blog on it actually to say, look, no communication is worse. And as leaders, you might not know at the moment, you might not have a plan, you might not have a policy, but actually just make sure staff know that and you're working with them to get an output. It's better to keep people informed. You know, we've got some people who've relocated during the pandemic, haven't we? Naturally, they've moved out of the city, gone back to family homes in the countryside. And so for them to bring them back into an office, again, they need time to prepare and time to organise and the logistics of the commute back into the workplace. So I think communication is absolutely key in what you do with the model.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think, Rachel?
With hybrid working, I also think it's about reimagining what the workplace is now, knowing that people can work from home if they want to do that. But I often think we shouldn't just rush back to go into working in desks in a communal area. You know, let's reimagine what those workplaces might be. Let's use them for something else. So for wellbeing activities, you know, use it as a hub that can create better well-being, use it for collaboration, for creative thinking, for developing relationships, rather than just assume it, you know, just plonking back a desk, people back in desks. You know, I think we should look at actually, if people want to work from home, great, and the flexibility around that, but let's not just then get them to work in an office when we can use that office space for so much more, and so much value can be added to both the organisation and to those individuals. So I think the hybrid work, I think, will work, but I do think that we need to not just move back into offices. We need to look at those office spaces and see them differently.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good. Rachel, do you agree, Alison?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, the big thing is not to make assumptions about what your employees are going to feel like. You know, one of the things that I've learned is that, you know, we can sort of look at somebody that's living in a small flat, you know, and think, oh, well, they won't want to work from home. But we have no idea. And it's only by asking and finding out, you know, what it is that they might want. And that, of course, might change over time as well. So as much flexibility as possible, but just listening, not making assumptions about what we think people want. to me is key, and certainly that's been my experience of people that have been working from home, is that everybody's different. And I know that you can't accommodate everybody, you're absolutely right, but unless we know what people want individually, we can't really make a plan that's going to work for everybody.
And I think Rachel's point was interesting about having this wellbeing hub in the office for when people return. I'd like to explore that a bit more. What other things could we do to help support people when they're returning? Because this new normal is still a bit different for all of us, and there'll be a lot of anxiety around going back into the workplace. So what other ideas do we have about supporting that?
One of the things that I've seen a couple of companies do that's worked really well is actually, and of course this is the perfect time of the year to do it, is to have an event outside. You know, I've seen rounders events happening, and I know this is not in the office, as Rachel was saying, but you know, we can use the outdoor space. We're very lucky in Lincolnshire. We've got so much outdoor space, and we know for a fact that, you know, being in nature is calming, it's relaxing. People are much more likely to share any worries or anxieties they have if they're outdoors. And so using the outdoor space as well as the indoor space, and I agree with Rachel, you know, it's not just about plonking yourself back in an office. Where there's an opportunity to have meetings outside, to do team games, particularly when you've had some employees that have been furloughed and others that have been working all the time, bringing people together in a non-threatening environment. And whether you play games or just have a picnic, or you know, whatever it might be, then I think that's a great idea. And I know with my past experience working with children, they are much more likely to be themselves and talk about things when they're outdoors and when they're in a non-threatening environment. So yeah, extend the office outdoors wherever possible, and use all this wonderful space that we've got in Lincolnshire.
I think that's a really good point, because we've had a client recently who really tried to make a fantastic attempt to get everybody back together and arrange some drinks and a bite to eat, but obviously some staff are quite nervous and apprehensive about that. They don't want to be going back into that arena. And so for them, actually, the wellbeing and engagement piece kind of fell on its knees slightly, because it was actually a little bit disengaging for them. They were slightly anxious and slightly worried about that. So it's absolutely putting an arena like being outside where people are naturally going to feel that they can socially distance and feel comfortable as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it is about that gentle, like, re-immersion back into work. So, you know, it was that, you know, things that I've suggested to organisations is, why don't you create a video, even if it's just someone with a GoPro, nothing professional, someone with a GoPro or mobile phone walking around the office where changes have been made because desks have been moved because of social distancing and risk assessment. So that when the employee first comes into the office, it's not all new for them, or it doesn't feel too alien, because they can see, you know, and, you know, suggested it was born out of an idea of somewhere I do something, a sport, and the guy kind of did a video of how he expects people to move around the site. And I thought that was really useful, because when you turned up, you kind of already were quite familiar with the processes. And also I think doing something socially is, again, it's that gentle kind of pushing, or, you know, persuading people back into workplaces. There's no pressure there. You can just sort of really re-familiarize yourself with people and the culture, which then makes it a little bit easier when you start doing the work, that it's not just this sudden no work to work. It's kind of that middle ground, isn't it? So I think it's a great idea to do something social outside as well.
And I think options is a really good idea. You know, we're the same here. If we're having a team meeting, we're able to have that in person if you feel comfortable to do so. Otherwise, we have hybrid meetings. I do love this word hybrid. I didn't really use it before COVID, so I use it all the time now. We have hybrid meetings, which, you know, obviously online and in person, and there's no pressure. You don't have to come in, because everyone's circumstances are different, as we've been saying. So those options are really important, I think. Do you think, Michelle, that we need to have a kind of formal process as well? Do you think we need to re-induct people? Rachel's video idea, I think, is excellent, so people aren't coming into something really shocking and not knowing what it looks like. But do we actually really need to re-induct people as well? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. The reinduction thing's, you know, really important for the individuals to feel that they know where they're landing back into. So absolutely, like Rachel just said, I think the office environment in itself, if we are asking people to come back, that's quite, you know, a big hurdle for some people, and they've been at home for quite a long time. So for them to feel comfortable where they're going to be. So And obviously during that period, there's been probably likelihood of lots of changes in personnel. So regrettably, some businesses have obviously let staff go. So people are going to be kind of umming and ahhing, what does the organisation structure look like? So giving them that toolkit, making sure they are aware of that, you know, not necessarily kind of treating people where they are fresh new starters and going back to basics, but really being inducted. And obviously some sectors are going to be more critical. So obviously certain health sectors, care sectors, there is an element of obviously retraining and re-onboarding people in a more robust way. But if it's more of an office corporate environment, then it's more the communication piece around what's changed. And the second element to me is making people aware of what that business strategy is now. So what is the plan? Because again, we've seen a lot of businesses diversify over the last few years. So, well, over the last year and a half. So again, like people are coming back potentially to a slightly different business than what they left. So they need to know what their objectives are, what the requirements are, because, you know, 2 or 3 weeks in, they're going to feel, you know, slightly lost and what's my role in this business. So if you do all that from day one and up front, and it doesn't necessarily need to be too formal, it can be line manager led, electronic, you know, if we've got tools and kit to do it online, if we are asking them to stay at home, just really making sure it's well thought out and considered. And again, just be mindful of the individual needs. So just, you know, somebody would rather be in, have a coffee face to face and do it with that, you know, very informal, as opposed to getting 20 people in a meeting room where they're going to feel uncomfortable if they're not socially distanced. So just, I think it's about asking and listening, isn't it? That's absolutely critical through the next few weeks as we're getting staff back. I think that's vital advice that I would suggest.
Yeah,
exactly. Go on, Alison.
I think it's really important that people feel valued, because if they feel valued, then they are going to want to work and they're going to be more productive at work. And so I think even if businesses have made really small changes over the last 18 months, all those little changes add up and it can make someone feel very overwhelmed. And, you know, they may seem really insignificant to people that have continued working, but they're not, you know, because they all stack. And so the last thing any employee needs to feel is overwhelmed before they even start. So yeah, to help people, I agree, Michelle, you know, a reintroduction of some kind, it's not the same as a new induction, a new employee induction, but it has to meet the needs. It has to be tailored to the needs of each individual so that they feel valued. And in the long term, it will be so worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no different to somebody returning from maternity or long-term sickness. You hope best practice you would do that. I suppose the flag is just being mindful that if there's a significant change to their roles and responsibility, when does it become an informal induction or when does it become formal consultation? So I think just making sure people don't walk by the fact that if you're asking them to do different roles and responsibilities, or you've changed their job title, that's obviously a different process and a formal process that you need to obviously be mindful of and following. So I think, again, that otherwise to people would instantly feel they're coming back to a very different position if businesses aren't taking that proper approach through formal consultation. But how you do that, again, is taking the approach of making sure that you put into place that support for staff during that difficult conversation if need be.
And Alison mentioned about changes, because there are so many changes that we've all had to implement. You know, even here, you know, we know we've had to put in obviously hand sanitizing, distances, perspex screens, etc. How do you think, Rachel, we could communicate those changes to the team?
I think, you know, again, about talking, having those individual conversations. Maybe you could do a group call just to introduce, say, this is what we're starting to do, but your line manager or your supervisor will be in touch with you personally. I think it is just, again, like using video if you can, or photographs, or like you say, Michelle said, invite people in for on a one-to-one basis to have a coffee in the workplace so they get a feel for what it is. I also think about having phased returns, which is something that we would use if someone was on long-term sick, and also be aware that if you do a phased return, that it's not going to go smoothly. That some people might start doing that phased return and realise it's not right for them for whatever reason. You know, we have to understand that 18 months has passed and there has been quite a lot of psychological harm done in that time, and people have lived through something that we haven't lived through before, and so everybody's been changed by it. We can take some positives from that, but also there's been some negative impacts as well. So not assuming that once you start on that phased return it's going to go back to how it was. It's understanding that people might go backwards and realize that's not for them. You know, you don't know after 18 months not being in the workplace that when you go back, actually it's not what you thought it was, or, you know, so it's again, it's those individual conversations, having that transparent, clear communication with everyone individually, rather than just, like you say, making assumptions that just because they're this, they're that.
Exactly. How do you think we can make sure people feel supported then, and feel like once they are back, how can we make sure they feel able to say that to people, like what Rachel said, if they're not feeling comfortable or the phased return isn't working, how can we make sure a staff member knows they can say that?
I just
Personally, I think it's having the ability.
Sorry, Rachel. Just listening, actually, you know, one of the things that again, I know from experience that's worked is, you know, on a Zoom call, for instance, the managers put themselves on mute, allow the employees to do the talking. You know, we all make assumptions based on our own unconscious beliefs. And so once we know that, we can then suspend that belief and actually listen to what other people are saying. You know, it's yes, we've got a lot to communicate as leaders, as managers. There's a lot to say. However, it's just as important to listen. That to me is a key thing, you know, and listen to individuals rather than make assumptions about what you think they're going to feel, or what you think that their experience has been. Because you're right, Rachel, you know, it's different for everybody. Some people have actually really enjoyed not having to go into the office every day, you know, for those that have been working from home, for instance. So for those that have been furloughed, they will have discovered things about themselves that they didn't know. They are not going to be the same person they were a year ago, 18 months ago, emotionally, socially, certainly physically. I know a lot of people have put on a bit of weight, but, you know, intellectually they will not be the same person. And so for employers to not make those assumptions, oh, I know that person, I know how they're going to be. No, it may be very, very different. To me, that's the key to that understanding and the valuing of and supporting people in the transition.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got one.
You've got anything to add?
Sorry, we've got one client who's been really proactive in actually communicating the role of the mental health first aiders. So instead of it just being when the furlough staff are coming back, so it kind of feels quite targeted, they've actually just made sure that throughout the period, the mental health first aid has been very visible. So in newsletters, they've been writing blogs, and just really making sure that they've been overly accessible for staff, just so again, so if people don't use the line managers, they are using those mental health first aiders to kind of listen and ask those questions and get the relevant support. But, you know, line managers are going to be crucial in this as well, aren't they? They're the role that they play in making sure, exactly like you said, Alison, they actually take the time to listen, ask the right questions, and signpost and facilitate the help that people need.
Rachel?
I think, you know, and come back to listening, it's also about, you know, making sure that they're active listening, and actually you are, you know, I always talk about being present with someone, being there, being physically there, when physically or thing, but actually mentally present with someone. Like, you can listen and you can listen, can't you? And it is this latter, you know, you want to actually, you know, just remove distractions, you know, I always like, when I'm in the conversation, to turn my phone over, have it on silent or do not disturb. So I am physically present as much as I can be with that person. So I'm really listening, because often we miss the intricacies of people's language, and actually someone says they're okay, and if you're listening properly, you'll know that they're not okay. And I think that's really important, that the line managers actually, you know, it's not just a hurry phone call just to, you know, make sure we touch base. It's actually a really considered conversation, so that person actually is being listened to. I think that's really important. And again, with like mental health first aid, one thing I've suggested to a couple of my businesses is buddying up people with someone else that's not their line manager. So you have like a buddy system where you can talk to someone who is in the business, maybe not related to you in terms of your role on a day-to-day basis, but someone who you can have a conversation with, or people can have conversations with each other, where it won't affect their day-to-day job, but they have that other person who can act as that kind of coach, mentor, or just a listening ear. I totally believe that everyone within the organisation should have some form of first aid for mental health, so that everybody is aware of what to look out for, the signs and symptoms, so that everybody is kind of looking out for, oh, we're in this together, aren't we? And we should actually, it's not just about the people who are trained in it, everyone should have that awareness around mental health, so that it can be picked up, and you know, you can feel assured that there's someone who's looking out for you. We're in this together, and we are, as an organisation, as organisations, we should be, you know, it's not just about individuals, it's about the collective. You know, as one, we are in this together, and we should support each other regardless of role, responsibility, you know, position. It's about just supporting people, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's everyone's responsibility, isn't it? Would you agree, Alison?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, just picking up on the buddy system, I agree with that. In my previous job, I was a cancer buddy because I had cancer 11 years ago, and so I then became a cancer buddy in my organisation. And in fact, recently I've had a conversation with a lady that I buddied. Is that the right phrase? I don't know. But anyway, I supported her when she then had cancer, and you know, she said to me, she said, I can't tell you how valuable that was because you understood, you'd been through it. So I think a buddy system is a really, really good idea in this. And, you know, this is where people that maybe have been on long-term sick previously, you know, although we've not had this experience of furloughed, there will be people in organisations that have been on long-term sick. So they will have some understanding of what it's like to come back to the workforce after a prolonged period of absence, and so that's where the buddy system might work really well. And to pick up on your point on active listening, absolutely, this is where I love NLP, is the listening to the language. You know, to listen out for things like, you know, if an employee is saying things like can't a lot, and can't, won't, or it'll never work, you know, having those sort of negative language, you know, they may be feeling really, really stuck. They may be feeling overwhelmed. They may not be able to see a way clear, you know, in terms of coming back. They may be feeling very anxious. And certainly if they're using words like need to, got to, must do all the time, then maybe they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves. So, you know, language is a code. It's really important. Yes, active listening is key. You know, suspend your own thoughts and beliefs, just listen to the language and allow that to give you an indication of what a person might be feeling. Even if they don't know themselves, then, you know, it can help. And asking the right questions, as you said, Michelle. So, yeah.
We've probably got a few line managers watching this today and thinking, oh, wow, this feels like a lot of responsibility on top of what I'm already doing. I really need to get my staff back. You know, what if, they might be thinking, what if there's conflict between some of the staff that worked throughout and some that are returning from furlough? How do you think line managers could mitigate that conflict? What could they do? Michelle?
I think it's demystifying that fact, isn't it? I think line managers have got a really important place. You know, they might have their own personal opinion if they've worked through and other staff have been furloughed, and obviously they've probably been under significant challenges for the last period. But I think it's making sure that outwardly to the rest of the staff, they're quite clear and convincing in the message that actually we need to be united in this. Exactly like Rachel said, we're all in this together. And we're quite clear on the fact that, you know, there isn't, the rationale was there, the reason was there to furlough. It's happened in every business, most businesses in the UK. It's not something that's happened uniquely to your business. And obviously just to make sure that you kind of demystify that myth that being furloughed has been an easy ride, because that is 100% not the case for people. We've talked about the impact on people's mental health. So I think it's bringing those people together, and we've talked about it before, those activities. So as line managers, try to think about if you can do some engagement stuff, we can bring staff together, get them back in together as team dynamics, asking them what they'd like that to be. So is it a drink on a Friday night in a beer garden somewhere, or is it a social thing that we can do where we can get them doing some games and some rounders like Alison mentioned. But yeah, again, it goes back to the listening piece, doesn't it? Line managers have really got to listen to those kind of rumblings that are happening either in the office, on the shop floor, to kind of make sure that they're nipping it in the bud as soon as that happens. So if there is any tension between staff, and there's not to say there's going to be, but if there is, it's a conversation that's swiftly acted upon, and we're dealing with it proactively before it becomes an issue. And my guidance to line managers is just taking the time, you know, that first week back, making sure you're catching up at the end of the week with that furloughed staff. You know, how's the week been? Any issues, any concerns? Obviously, going without saying you're in contact daily, but actually putting some formal time in the diary to have those catch-ups with that person, and doing it with the staff that have worked through as well, because, you know, don't walk by the fact that they also will feel slightly, well, all these people have come back, we've now got 50% staff back into this environment, how does that feel? So to just offer those drop-in sessions, or formally put it in the diary to sit with people, to do that active listening, and do, you know, making sure you're taking the time to do it, because we all know what the day jobs are like. We sometimes don't make the time to do that listening piece. So really important.
Yeah, I would add as well, you know, as managers, allow yourself to be vulnerable as well. Let your employees know that it's tough for you and you don't know all the answers. You haven't got it all sorted. Don't pretend that you know and that you're all okay with everything, because actually, you know, if you say to your employees, do you know, this is really tough and we need to work through this together, as Rachel said, you know, I don't know all the answers, I've been feeling this way. That then gives permission to your employees to say, yeah, well, actually, do you know what? I've been really stressed about this, or this is something that's worried me. Everybody, we're all human. So I don't, you know, I think getting rid of this idea that we have, you know, as managers, you have to be the ones that know everything and have all the answers, and that you're, you know, you're paid enough to know all of this stuff. That's not true. This is a totally unique situation. And, you know, for managers, this has been really, really tough. And so tell your employees, allow them to know how tough it's been for you and some of the feelings that you've had, and give them permission to sort of offload as well. You know, it becomes more human, and I think that helps with communication, and it helps you to engage and do that sort of one-to-one thing, where you're going to know what it is your employees need.
Do you have anything to add to that, Rachel?
Yeah, I was also saying it's about listening as well, but also those people who, you know, it's about learning what we've learned. We've all grown through this experience, and it's about bringing, you know, starting to re-engage those learning. I often suggest to businesses do lunchtime learning sessions where, you know, it's bringing your whole self to work, isn't it? And that's, like Alison mentioned, we've all changed. Something's changed in all of us, regardless whether you've worked through it or you've been furloughed or whatever your situation. You know, just talk about, we're all going through the same storm, but we're in different boats, and that's kind of how I talk about it to people. But we can all take something positive from it, and learning those lessons and sharing those lessons and sharing those new found skills maybe is a way to kind of show people are related. And I would tend to do it over food. For me, I think food is such a great conduit, as in nature, in bringing people. Food is a great way of bringing people together. And, you know, could you ever bring something, you know, a new food they've tried over during lockdown, you know, or suggest a new takeaway that they've had, or, you know, it's about, you know, saying actually we've all grown as people, and there are positives, and always, you know, and not saying it hasn't been hard, because it has. Every single person, regardless of the situation, people have all struggled, let's be honest, and there has been some harm. But we can also look at all the positives that have come out of it, and, like you say, people reassessing their lives, and maybe they realise they do want to do something different, and how, as an employer, you can facilitate that for them, because I think that's also really important. That if someone comes back and actually it's not for them, as an employer, can you help them find their thing? And facilitate that, because that is a lasting legacy you can do for that person, isn't it? Is to help them transition into a different situation.
I've certainly witnessed that recently, that depending on the cycle when people come back, obviously some businesses do the appraisal cycle, don't they? And that's an opportunity to explore personal development. Some businesses have moved on a bit from that, and it becomes a constant conversation. But if you are traditionally having an annual appraisal and someone's coming back in September and you've appraised the staff in June, don't forget to have those personal development chats with those individuals, because to leave it for a full cycle again, you're going to walk by some of that, aren't you? So, you know, it just depends how you structure and how you orientate, but certainly with a traditional annual review process, you are kind of losing that opportunity to re-sit down with those individuals, set the objectives, but to listen to what those personal development needs are going to be, because absolutely they're going to have 100% changed. People might have had aspirations a few years ago to climb that career ladder and want to do different things, and now actually they may be happy at the level they're doing, want to be part-time, want to go off and do other things, and they've reprioritized things. So I think it's also, you know, don't, as line managers, don't be driven by the corporate processes you've got in place to stop some of those conversations that you should just be having.
Exactly, and I think if you allow that person to be their whole self, regardless whether they work full-time, part-time, flexi-time, hybrid, you know, they're going to bring so much more value to that organisation if they feel comfortable, be able to have, you know, say, actually, I do want to come back, but I don't want to do it full-time for whatever reason, and letting corporate company, you know, organisations embrace that and go, that's great, because I see it as whatever someone does outside of their work, they bring skills and value into the workplace. So, you know, for example, I have people who don't manage anybody, but at the weekend they manage the local sports team, and they have management skills, but they don't necessarily use it in the workplace, but they can use those skills in other ways to add value to what they do, but also add value to the organisation. So I think we need to stop, like Michelle said, stop thinking about what the corporate is, because it's not corporate, it's about humans and how we bring our true selves to work and have culture which embraces people's individuality and accepting of those individual choices we all make. Because if we can bring our whole selves to work, we're going to be better employees.
Yeah, just something that's come up just from what you've said to add, bringing it back to what you said, Naomi, for managers and leaders, don't be afraid to ask for help, outside help. You know, don't think you have to do it all by yourself. Just ask for help.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think sometimes you feel like you need to keep it in-house, but having one of, you know, external, one of you, for example, coming into the business and talking to the businesses about how to manage this and just getting a fresh perspective, there's a lot to be said for that, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
a question that
I was just saying, you know, the value that we can bring as well is because for me, I'm speaking to lots of different organisations, and what I do is pick up nuggets from all of them and then transfer that back. Sometimes when we're within an organisation, we can become quite siloed and quite narrow-minded and narrow in our thinking. So I think having that external help, even if it's just someone to offload to, they can bring in those little nuggets of what is other people are doing that have seen value to it. And I think that's what that external support, like you agree, Alison, what you can bring is, it might, you know, not actually give them any advice, you just can be at that as that sounding board and offer, go, oh, actually, have you tried this? You know, and they might not try it, but it might be those ding light bulb moments, go, actually, yeah, you know, why don't I do that? So I think that external support is crucial.
And I think sometimes we forget to have fun in the workplace as well. And I really like that lunch and learn that Rachel mentioned. And the first time I came across that was in Australia, actually, when I was over there doing research 2 years ago. And they had a lunch and learn session, and it would be a different staff member each time in this organisation that would share something about them that no one else knew, that they were comfortable to share. And it might even just been about they do triathlons and nobody knew that, or, you know, something they were really interested in. And then the rest of the team got really involved. And it didn't eat into all the lunch breaks. So it wasn't like an hour talk or anything. It was like 10 minutes. But it allowed people to ask more questions if they wanted to. And I think we can get caught up, especially with COVID. I think there's been this mentality to work more because we've been able to, because we're not traveling to meetings. And actually, we've lost some of the fun. Because when Zoom started, people were like, right, for the first team meeting, wear a funny hat, or for the next team meeting, bring a cuddly toy. And that all seems to have dissipated, and it's become very corporate again and very serious. So, you know, how can we inject some more fun into this way of working? Have we got any ideas?
I agree. I think, you know, that play, you know, when we're childlike, and I know this from experience, when we're childlike, we're stress relieving and it's really creative. You know, I think we're all equally creative. So I would suggest doing things like creative thinking sessions. And with creativity, it's a bit of a leveler. You know, it doesn't matter what position you are in with an organisation, we're all equally creative, whether we believe it or not. And those kind of situations actually are really energetic. They're really energising. but also when we are also doing some things like that are childlike, so not being childish but being childlike. So things I've suggested to organisation is arrange like a school sports day kind of thing, where you're doing those old school, those activities you did when you were a child, egg and spoon race, beanbag race, three-legged race, if socially distant, trying to work out so it's safe. But become that child again, because when you're childlike, I think there is a lot of stress relieving in that, but also that creativity. You start thinking of ideas that you would never think of when you're in that kind of adult. I can't say this because I feel like I'm going to say a stupid idea, but when you're in that kind of state, people are very open and very absorbing of new ideas and new ways of thinking. So I think creative thinking, or do something that's childlike. So I have loads of Lego, and I often bring Lego into when I run sessions, and it's amazing how quickly the Lego comes out and people's faces light up and they start playing with it. And then by the end of the session, I've got like an array of like sculptures on tables, and it's just things like that, like you say, take away the element of, yes, we're here to do a job, and actually at some point you need to be serious, but we don't need to be serious 100% of the time. We can have play in our lives, be it Lego or other things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Rachel. I think all of those things, the things that we've mentioned so far, like the rounders and the Lego and all of that, if it reminds people of their childhood, they are more likely to switch off that right brain and sort of become creative, and that is when they even in that environment, they are more likely to say, do you know what, I've been feeling really worried about this. That's when they're more likely to voice those things as well. So even in those times of fun and play, actually that's when people can organise their own thoughts and express themselves in lots of different ways. And so those are the sort of anchors, if you like, the Lego and the rounders and the getting the paints out, or even music, music from an era gone by, music, food, games, all of those things. These are all levelers, and they all bring back memories for people, and that's when they can take off that corporate hat and just be themselves. So yeah, couldn't agree more, Rachel.
What do you think, Michelle?
Yeah, I think it's just it's listening and asking the question again, isn't it? Asking people what they'd like to see. And I think just making sure it doesn't fall on line managers' shoulders to organise, because I think that in itself is one of the things why it doesn't always happen, because everybody say there's an appetite to do it, but obviously they've got their other things and other priorities to do. So maybe instigating a social club committee, getting a few people together to organise it and take it in turns to facilitate it, because I think that there's always a passion to do stuff, but it's the same people again and again and again in a business who ends up organising it, and then they become quite fairly criticised for having the same type of events. So just make sure you've got a really good cross representation of staff, ask them what they'd like, maybe do a bit of a vote system, and then facilitate something and take turns in organising. I think is crucial. Otherwise you do fall into the trap of the same person doing it and feeling slightly criticised if it doesn't go to plan. So it can affect them in that way.
And I think it's the same as around HR. Don't assume HR is going to do a lot of the stuff, because a lot of people assume that HR or talent management, they're responsible for people, so they should do all this legwork. But a lot of things around what I do within an organisation, it's like I said before, it's everyone's responsibility. Wellbeing, engagement, culture, creativity. We're all taking responsibility of doing those little things. And the lunchtime learning is great because you pull it over to the staff. You say, who wants to share their passion with other people? And therefore you do tend to get, and most people, if they're passionate about something, will be happy to talk about it, be it triathlon or crochet or learning a new language, for example. I think it's always really lovely to pass over, like Michelle said, that responsibility to other people, and then you get that engagement, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's about not being competitive either, because for some people the idea of doing a rounder, playing rounders, might be great. I mean, I hated rounders at school, so the idea of that for me, and particularly if I was working in an organisation where a lot of young people, I've just turned 60, so I would immediately think, oh God, they could do it better than I could. So it is about, again, just making sure that it's done in a way that where there isn't a great deal of organising to do, actually, because everybody's going to be busy, everybody's going to be feeling overwhelmed if they are coming back, so things that don't take much organisation, and there isn't lots of rules and, well, you know, I've got to produce 100 handouts for this or whatever. No, you know, just keep it really, really simple. And that way, you know, it doesn't matter how it goes. Don't make it competitive, just make it fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I think sometimes as well, we really underestimate small gestures, don't we?
Yeah.
So, you know, for us, we've worked throughout, we haven't had anyone furloughed. So what we did was we sent everyone a colleague box just to say thank you for still being with us and for being a key worker and a frontline essential worker. And that was, no one was expecting that, and it came in the post. So some of them, you know, had them on the Zoom call with us. Some of them didn't want to, and that's fine. But it's just letting people know that they are valued and appreciated, and even just saying thank you to somebody. You know, someone once said to me a long time ago, a handwritten card always goes a lot further than an email. You know, so we always send handwritten cards out to people to say thank you. What other nuggets have you got about making people feel valued, especially after this long period of time where I think people have just felt we're just going through the motions? Any ideas we have with that?
Yeah, I agree with you, Naomi. I think I always send stuff to people, you know, whether it's my clients or personal friends. And, you know, I've done it for years, and I just still think, you know, we're very lucky in the UK that a cost of a stamp is still very relatively cost effective, you know. And okay, if you've got a lot of organisations, it's done that, but like you say, it's lovely to receive a card in the post when it's unexpected. You know, I've been brought to tears a number of times when people have sent me stuff just because they saw me struggling, or they've seen that I've had a hard time. And it is those kind of gestures to do, you know, kind of things, that kind of thing to do. I think it's a great way to show, because it's easy to bang out an email, isn't it? But actually to sit down and write a card and get a stamp and put it in an envelope, write the address, put it in the post box, that, you know, that is demonstrating effort, isn't it? And the little gestures go a long way, don't they? You know, they do. I know that, you know, as a receiving them, but also giving, it's just that human thing, isn't it? Let's become more human. Let's actually treat people like humans.
Yeah, I can't think of a better way really than something like sending a card. I used to do this with my students. At the end of each year, I would send them a card, and I would always, again, it would be handwritten, and I would always put something in it that was very personal to them. So it would always be about remembering something that they'd done that year, or not an achievement, but just something they'd done or said, something quirky or whatever, that made it really, really personal to them. And that was always more valuable than you know, any grand gesture. So it absolutely is, Rachel. It's about bringing it back to being human, and you know, we all want to feel that we're valued, and we're listened to, and we're noticed for who we really are. Not what we achieve or whatever, but just who we really are. And so those little personal things are absolutely vital.
And I think another thing that I suggested to a couple of businesses who have a larger staff in numbers is maybe create some postcards that can be sent internally or through, you know, so it's not necessarily the line manager or senior manager's responsibility, but having postcards where if someone gave, you know, supported you a little bit over and above what you expected, there's a little postcard that you can send, so thank you for that, or, you know, I'm thinking of you, you know, just a generic set of like 4 to 5 postcards that can be mass produced but are available through means where other people, you know, within the organisation, you can give people pats on the back, you know, whatever it might be. And that's gone down really well. You know, they found that the staff really appreciate being thanked, not by their line manager, but by someone else within the organisation when they've done something that they felt was in their job role, but actually it was over and above and somebody else noticed that. So, you know, it's little things like that. So it doesn't necessarily, again, doesn't have to fall on the line manager. It's actually staff appreciating staff and them leading the way in creating this very inclusive, accepting culture. But as people, as individuals, we're more than just a job role, we're more than just a title, we're more than the organisation we work for, we're human. And I think allowing your staff to send a thank you or high five, what a great presentation you did, it's just something nice, isn't it? It's been recognised for, yes, you're paid to do a job, but sometimes it's nice just to say thank you or well done, you did that really well today, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree. I think peer-to-peer recognition is really valuable. In a past life, we used to run an internal recognition scheme, and we actually aligned it to our corporate values. And I think that sometimes helps, because it's obviously people have joined the business against those values. So, you know, kind of reminding yourself what people are doing, and for people to praise against those values is quite important. But I think the language is really crucial as well. Just going back to Alison's point about competition, I spoke to somebody yesterday, and they've had a scheme in place for some time, and they call it a star performer. And it's a sector that's very, you know, sales driven. And so for me, that instantly feels quite competitive. And, you know, lo and behold, the people getting the star performer are the people who are achieving highest based on achievement, and not actually the contribution to each other and the team. So I think that, you know, if you're going to implement something, just really think about the messaging, how you word it, and how it could land. And again, ask staff what they'd like to see. You know, if you're going to recognise each other, how would you like that to work? You know, what does it mean to you? Is it a voucher? Is it the chief exec coming to speak to you? Is that actually the peer-to-peer stuff, which is more valuable? And just, you know, trying to get some feedback from them before you kind of embark on something, without assuming what we, you know, we said it this earlier, didn't we? We're assuming we think we know what people might want.
Yeah, and I think the thing about contribution, that I think it's really relevant. You know, I've been doing some work with some students, and they saw it as a competition, and actually went, well, actually, you might think that you've won, but it's actually the person who's contributed the most, and that wasn't necessarily the person that did the most work, but it's the person that demonstrated compassion and empathy, as well as teamwork, as well as the knowledge they brought. But it's this, I think I think so much we should be focused on contribution rather than like you say, you know, numbers on the stats, you know, KPIs about what you contributed, and that might not necessarily be monetary. It might not be a value you've brought, but you know, if your team feel that you've contributed to their well-being, or you've supported them to deliver something, then that should be rewarded just as much as bringing in the dough, basically, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. That's quite like the value connection, because it becomes behavioural. It doesn't become about performance. It becomes purely about the behaviours that you're kind of wanting to see. And it's not subjective then, is it? So if it's just like, oh, they're my best friend and I'm going to nominate them every single month, actually you've got a little bit of a framework for fairness for people to kind of work towards. So but yeah, asking people is critical, isn't it?
We do this with young children, you know, in nurseries and early years settings. Children get acknowledged for being kind to each other, and yet somewhere along the line that gets lost completely, and it becomes much more about achievements and you know, exam grades or whatever, and what a shame. And we've got the opportunity now to turn this back and bring much more compassion back into the workplace, because it's what people are crying out for, and we need it more now than ever. And yeah, you know, and I know, Michelle, you're an NLP practitioner as well, and so yeah, language is absolutely crucial. It really is, and using the language around empathy and compassion is going to be so much more valuable than star performer.
Yeah, it's great. It's really good points for us to remember. And like I said, I think you're quite right, Alison. I worked in nurseries many years ago as well, and I love that ethos around celebrating kindness, and we have lost that along the way. We've had lots of campaigns along the way about remembering to be kind as well, and I think we need to remember it in all we are and who we are, and in the workplace as well. So I think we've had some really good discussions today. I think there's been some really key points that I will definitely take away, like arranging things outside, you know, Rachel's points about being all in this together. Obviously, Michelle reminding us about mental health first aid. You know, there's lots of providers locally that provide that, that people can tap into. And it's important for it to not be a tick box exercise, but to be something that's part of your well-being, the Wellbeing Hub that Rachel mentioned. The lunch and learn sessions, I'm going to have a look at getting that incorporated again into the workplace, because we do forget about these things. And creative thinking sessions. But I think the kind of main kind of tip for myself is to remember that we all want to be valued and appreciated. And that's not just, you know, our employees, but it's management as well. And often those of us that are self-employed, working on our own, or those of us at the top, are the least to feel that way. So everybody needs to have that. So I just want to go round and get kind of one tip takeaway from you, and anything else that you feel that you wanted to add that you haven't had a chance to. So we'll start with Alison, please.
I think it's nothing that hasn't been said already. I think for me, it's about not making assumptions, first of all, and having humility, active listening, and just taking your time. You know, don't put pressure on yourself. Give yourself a break, whether you're a leader, a manager, an employee, whoever, it doesn't matter, but give yourself a break. Be kind to yourself, because once you have self-compassion and self-awareness, then that cascades to everybody else. So that I think is my number one takeaway.
Again, that's a really good point, and I think people forget that you are the role model whether you want to be or not. Yeah. So in the organisation, the line manager should be, as much as possible, role modelling that behaviour. So, you know, even here we have a set work lunch break, which is at 12, so we will be finished at 12 today, and I go over and have lunch with everybody else because I want to mix with everyone, and I don't want to be saying that I can sit at my desk and work through my lunch, but you must have a break. You know, so it needs to be role modelled on the way down, and I really like that there's not too much of a hierarchy. Obviously you need it for certain things, but it's the way you get to know your staff is through those breaks and those moments when you have those informal chats about things. So I think that's really important. Thank you, Alison. Michelle?
I think for me there's three things for employers and employees. So for employers, mainly inform. So we've talked about it. Keep people informed when you want them back into the workplace, what change has happened. Make sure you give them as much information and tools and guidance as you can when they're coming back from furlough. But for everybody, it's that ask and listen. So ask the right questions, ask them appropriately. You know, how's the week been? Is there any concerns, any worries, issues? And that's across the whole board, whether that's a manager asking an employee or asking each other as peer-to-peers, and then listen to what response you get. So, and signpost those people to get the right support, whether that's, you know, you as line manager going to the director if you don't know. Like Alison said, we don't always have the answers. So if we need to go and ask for the questions, let's go and ask. And if it's for an employee, signpost them to somebody who might be able to help if you can't. So yeah, inform, ask and listen to me is the kind of three takeaways.
I like that. I think, you know, we need to be open and informing people. Otherwise, you know, without the information, people don't know where they are, do they, or what they're doing. And we've talked a lot today about active listening, which obviously is a given in my profession, being a psychotherapist for 15 years. But you take it for granted because people don't actually know how to do that. Don't actually know how Rachel said to be present, to be in the moment, and, you know, to actively listen to people. And there's nothing worse than feeling you've gone to somebody and they haven't listened to you. So I think that's a really key takeaway from today as well. And to get in touch with one of you if people don't know how to do that, to get brush up on those skills. Rachel?
I think the other people have, you know, summed it up really nicely. I think for me, it's about bringing your true self, you know, having a culture, reminding that you've got a culture where people can be honest and open about how they're doing. And remember being childlike and learning. I'm very much around gratitude. So, you know, maybe having a gratitude board where you can say thank you or say what you're thankful for, you're grateful for. And remembering we can always, you know, I always think about you choose your attitude. You can choose to get up in the morning and be mardy, or you can choose to be happy. And not saying life's all rainbows and sunshine and unicorns, but the way, you know, you've got a choice, and actually trying to look at the positives in everything, you would actually find that there is positives in there. But even if you have to look really hard, I always think there's something positive about any situation. And so it's always having that kind of thought that actually I get to choose how I react. And yeah, I am feeling down today and I'm struggling, but I can talk to someone. I've got my buddy, or, you know, I feel comfortable in my environment, in my culture, my organisation, to say, help, I'm struggling, can I have some time? And I think that's like whatever level you work with an organisation, to have that kind of culture which allows people to be themselves, regardless of what that might be.
Yeah, really important. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Over to you, Jolie. You're on mute, Jolie.
Oh gosh, typical, isn't it? Thank you, Naomi, for facilitating the discussion today, and also thank you to Alison, Michelle and Rachel for offering your knowledge and experience to the audience. We've recorded the session and this will be available on our website in due course. If you wish to book on a free one-to-one with one of our experts you've seen today, this is available via our Leadership and Wellbeing Hub, which I will share in the link in the chat now for you, as well as in the follow-up email. But other than that, thank you, and I hope everyone has a lovely day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.